Hello, faithful, and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus no hot takes at all, just intelligent, level-headed 49ers discussion. And today we're going to be discussing Jennings' future with the 49ers. Is this his last season in San Francisco? I'll give you reasons why it is and reasons why it is not. Then we're going to be discussing rankings. Pro Football Focus has rankings of the top receiving cores in the league, top running back groups, and Bleacher Report has a list of the top 10 cornerback tandems in the NFL. I have some thoughts for each one of those lists. So let's get right into it. And Jennings, everybody's favorite dog on the team, everybody's favorite third down receiver, very well might be entering his final year with the 49ers. He went into the 2024 offseason and signed a 2-year, $15.4 million contract with $8.4 million guaranteed. His cap hit for this upcoming season, 2025, is a very manageable $4.3 million. That's because the 49ers tacked on 3 void years on the back end, which essentially necessitates more upfront money, and those placeholder numerical values in those void years just get wiped off the books when the 2026 offseason officially starts. Now, if you remember, in that 2024 offseason, the 49ers tendered him, I believe it was a second-round offer at about $4.8 million. So that contract that he signed for basically $7.7 million annually nearly doubled what he was getting on that second-year tender. So good on Juwan, good on his agent, good on the 49ers for keeping a piece that's become very important to them, given the injuries that the team has sustained, especially last year, but even in years past where you're having Debo miss a couple games a year, Ayuk may miss a game. Third and Juwan has become a very dependable target for the 49ers and so easy to root for because he's such a self-made receiver, a 7th-round draft pick out of Tennessee, started his first season on the practice squad, then got more playing time year 2, year 3, got his contract, 2-year extension in 2024, and now is in a contract year this year, and coming off of last season where he went 77 receptions for 975 yards and 6 touchdowns. A lot of that damage being done because Brandon Ayuk tore his ACL the first third of the season and wound up being a starter along with Debo, and then obviously Ricky Pearsall coming on the last couple weeks of the season. So nearly 1,000 yards, missed 2 games, one due to injury, one due to getting, nearly missed a full game the last week of the season, getting thrown out of the game in Arizona for back-to-back personal fouls fighting with a cornerback, or else he would have went over 1,000 yards. I'm not sure if there was any bonuses in his contract about that. And if there was, he, being a dog, didn't seem to care about it, just wanted to keep on battling through the whistle, through the end zone, I believe it was in Arizona, when he and the defensive back wound up getting thrown out. But with the money the Niners have given to Ayuk and elsewhere, there's a really good chance that Jennings is not going to come back. And here are the reasons why, in no particular order. But the 49ers drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round last year. Now, that could have been with an eye to understanding that they might not be able to keep either Brandon Ayuk or Debo Samuel long-term. And I've been on record for over a year and a half, probably closer to 2 years, saying that the plan was always going to be to sign Ayuk to the extension and then to trade or not, either release, trade, or not re-sign Debo Samuel after the 2025 season. And they opted for the trade to the Commanders, a 5th-round pick that they wound up getting for Debo. But Pearsall, as a first-round receiver, there are expectations for him, right? they are expecting, you're expecting when you draft a receiver in the first round to be a number 1 or number 2 receiver at worst on your team. Ayuk getting injured and coming off of the injury, I thought there was the chance that Debo maybe stays with San Francisco, and maybe then they trade him closer to the deadline to ensure that they have another veteran receiver for Brock in the offense. But that was not the case, not in the cards. Debo and Kyle had a very upfront and frank discussion, nothing contentious. Debo still has love for the Niners and Kyle and the organization. Ironically sent to Washington, which was where Ayuk was subtly campaigning to go since he played in Arizona State with second-year quarterback Jaden Daniels. So Debo's gone, and he was declining. He essentially declined every year coming off of his big year in 2021. His production, about 600-ish yards receiving last year. I'm not worried about finding a way to duplicate that. I think for the first month plus of the season, replicating what Ayuk brings to the team and Debo's numbers, I think, not that it's going to be a challenge, but it's a bit of an initial uphill climb for the offense, for Ricky, for Juwan, especially if bringing someone like Demarcus Robinson, and he's going to miss potentially the first 3 games, might be not the way to get off to the quickest of starts for San Francisco. Fortunately, they have a relatively soft start to the year, beginning in Seattle, then at New Orleans, then at home for Arizona and Atlanta. Or is it Atlanta and Jacksonville? I'm getting confused. I don't have the schedule up in front of me, but it's not a murderer's row the first month of the season. So bringing Ricky Pearsall in, I think, was more of a nod to understanding that Debo was probably gone than a detriment to Juwan Jennings signing a long-term extension. I think reason number 2, Ayuk got the amount of money that he did, right? So with Ayuk signing for about $30 million a year, although it's not really that, right, based on signing bonus and all that stuff, are the 49ers willing to spend, let's say, $15 to $20 million annually on Jennings and $30 million annually on Ayuk? They have the cap space. They're still a top 2 or top 3 cash spending team for the 2025 season. When all is said and done, people calling the Niners cheap, and they're blowing it up, and they're in the middle of a rebuild, and the window's closed, giving extensions to Brock and Kittle and Fred Warner. What they actually wound up spending cash-wise this year is still in the top 3 in the league, and I think the demise of the Niners is greatly overstated. But I am a believer in cash and cap allocations per position. Charvarius Ward gone for multiple reasons, but I don't think they were going to pay big money to 2 corners. I didn't think they were going to pay big money to 2 defensive ends. So they have Yetur Gross-Matos maybe making, I think, is about $8 million this year. They're bringing in a rookie in Mykel Williams. Only Trent Taylor, forget about at tackle, Trent Williams, forget Trent Taylor. He's gone. He's on IR. Trent Williams is the only person making big money on the line. You're only going to give big money to 1 running back in McCaffrey, 1 tight end in Kittle, although the tight end they brought in from the Jaguars got a nice contract. There aren't 2 linebackers making big money, which is why Dre's gone. There aren't 2 safeties, or really any safety making big money on the team, or at defensive tackle either. So positional finances and allocating cap money and cash and resources could be a hindrance since Ayuk got the money that he did. On top of that, this offseason, the Niners signed Demarcus Robinson from the Rams, 2 years, $8 million, $6 million guaranteed. Not a lot of money, but it's a 2-year deal. If it was a 1-year deal just for 2025 and both Robinson and Jennings were free agents after this season, then I think you can make a slightly stronger logical reasoning for Jennings to come back. But Robinson is under contract, not for a ton of money, right? But then it becomes a numbers game, right? Ayuk's here, and Pearsall, and Robinson, and Jennings. So if Pearsall takes the next step forward and becomes the number 2, how much money are you willing to pay a number 3 receiver, right? Like, as a big slot, and I know slot receivers get more snaps now than they did, even 10 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago. But how much is rational and you're willing to pay even for a player that is such a coach and organizational and fan favorite and productive player like Juwan Jennings is. Next reason, and a minor one, they drafted Jordan Watkins in the first round this year out of Ole Miss. Now, 5th round receiver, he's going to make the team. And if Demarcus Robinson is suspended for the first 3 games of the season, he's probably going to see playing time the first month of the season at wide receiver 4 at worst, and he'll probably be active as wide receiver 5 at the absolute worst on game days. I'm not saying, and I know there's been some positive reviews about Jordan Watkins at OTAs in shorts and a t-shirt, not wearing pads. Everybody take that with a grain of salt. I don't think Jordan Watkins is a Juwan Jennings replacement for 2026. If Jennings isn't on the team, I think Demarcus Robinson is more the Juwan Jennings replacement for 2026, but it becomes a numbers game as well, right? This year or after 2025, you have Ayuk under contract. You have Pearsall under contract. You have Demarcus Robinson under contract. You have Jordan Watkins under contract going into his second year. Hopefully he takes some sort of step forward, even though we have no idea what he's going to do his rookie year. You still have Cowing. You still have the rookie out of Montana who could make it out as a kick returner, although he would be a wide receiver on the roster, right? So still a numbers game. And that numbers game then correlates or equates to how much are you willing to pay a receiver that might be your number 3 big slot. But I think the biggest reason why Juwan Jennings isn't coming back is the contracts that receivers have gotten. I'm going to give you an example of a recent one. I'm going to give you an example of a one from a couple of years ago. I think Juwan Jennings and his agent are going to bet on themselves that with Ayuk hurt and Robinson may be missing time to begin the season, that Pearsall and Jennings starting the season may solidify Jennings as a starter, maybe into month 2 as Ayuk comes back. I don't think Ayuk comes back as an outside starting receiver initially, right? You want to get the legs under him. Maybe he starts out as your number 3. And then you have Demarcus Robinson as your number 4, right? These are just scenarios that I'm making up. So I think Jennings and his representation are willing to bet on themselves that with another good year, even if they don't go over 1,000 yards, 900 yards, he's in line for a big time payday comparatively to what he got. The recent example being Baltimore's Rashad Bateman signed a couple months ago, a 3-year, $36.7 million extension with $20 million guaranteed, coming off of last season with Baltimore, 45 receptions, 756 yards and 9 touchdowns, his best season by far in his 4-year career with Minnesota. So you get a receiver who, if I'm Juwan Jennings or his agent, I'm looking at the going, I had a much better year in 2024 than he's ever had with Baltimore, and you gave him $12 million per. That's the floor, and it's not even 12. The floor might be $14 or $15 million annually. I'm not sure about the guaranteed money, but if Rashad Bateman is getting that kind of money, what is Juwan Jennings going to wind up getting, right? And your historical example, even though it's only 3 years ago, in 2022, the Jacksonville Jaguars signed Christian Kirk away from the Arizona Cardinals for 4 years and $72 million, $37 million guaranteed. That's an $18 million average after his final season in Arizona, where he went 77, 982, and 5 touchdowns. Jennings last year went 77, 975, and 6 touchdowns. And there is this thing, folks, called inflation. If Christian Kirk got $18 million per on a contract that was signed in 2022, what will Jennings get if he puts up a comparable-ish season this year, as opposed to what he did last year, or compared to what he did last year? What is he going to do for signing a contract that will be 4 years newer than Christian Kirk's contract? Or I should say Christian Kirk's contract was signed 4 years ago for $18 million per. And a stat line nearly identical to what Jennings did last year. I think the money is going to be too rich if Jennings stays healthy, if he gets at least 800 receiving yards, right? Because Rashad Bateman last season, 756 on 45 receptions. It's a good yards per catch average. But man, if Jennings does that, if his floor is Rashad Bateman's 2024, then you know he's guaranteed at least $12 million a year. There was something floating around that Spotrac.com, who very reputable website, really good to see, cap hits and adjustments to the cap if a player is released, traded. Does a really good job for all sports regarding contracts, free agency, etc. But they have Jennings' number at $10 million a year. That's low. That's low. Even if Jennings gets hurt and misses a substantial portion of the season, he's going to get over $10 million annually. And probably over $20 million guaranteed. Maybe it's somewhere between Christian Kirk's $37 million guaranteed and Bateman's 20. Maybe it's in the mid to high 20s. It's probably going to be more than that, guys. Everybody going into free agency every offseason puts out there much more conservative numbers for basically any player than what they ultimately get. Jauan Jennings is going to get more than we think, but here's how I think he can stay. If the Niners put a full court press on and decide to sign him in the next couple months before training camp starts, because if they really want to keep Jauan Jennings and want him to be part of their plans moving forward, they have to sign him before the season starts. Certainly before the season ends, because you don't know what that stat line is going to look like, right? But it has to be done now. And maybe Jennings would not that he doesn't want to bet on himself, but would want to hedge against injury, right? Like that's the big thing. An ACL like Ayuk could change the mathematical equation quite a bit, especially for someone who's not really that fast, not really that agile, not a fantastic route runner. His hands have gotten better. Again, this is not him not wanting to bet on himself. This is a player wanting to hedge against injury. I think another way he could potentially stay, and this is actually a question I'm going to put out there for folks. And I'm going to put it out there on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, etc. Would you be willing to trade Brandon Ayuk before the trade deadline on November 4th if it means you could sign Jauan Jennings long-term? And long-term meaning a 3 or 4 year contract sometime during the season or at the end of the season. Now, this depends on a couple things. The biggest being Ayuk's got to be healthy and he's got to show before November 4th that he's you're not going to say he's fully back from the ACL. Everybody says, and I had ACL surgery 25 years ago. Granted, the surgery hasn't changed. They're either taking part of your patellar tendon, they're either taking part of your hamstring, or an ACL from a cadaver. Obviously, the rehab is different for a professional athlete than someone like myself, a layperson. But I didn't feel quite right until year 2, and Ayuk and everybody that comes back doesn't feel quite right until year 2, and they're rehabbing every friggin' day for multiple hours a day. For someone like me, it was 3 days a week at PT, and I was doing maybe some stretching or balancing exercises at home. Not even close to what professional athletes do. But if Ayuk is traded before November 4th, there's an $8.3 million cap hit in 2025, and the Niners would save $1.6 million on the cap. Now, that's prorated based on however many games into the season he's actually traded. I'm not sure what that cap hit or savings looks like in the years after 2025, if it's still an $8.3 million hit in 2026, 27, 28, and the savings get bigger. I'm not sure. I see numbers on certain websites. I'm not going to take them as gospel. I'm not exactly sure how that ultimately is going to work. But that's a possibility, right? And I think there's a lot of people that are frustrated. Fans are frustrated with Brandon Ayuk and are going to say, yeah, get him out of here. I love Jauan Jennings. Like, trade him and sign Jennings to $20 million a year. It's a bargain. You're getting savings. Now, at their best, Ayuk is a better receiver than Juwan Jennings. At his best, he's the best wide receiver on the team. Still better than Deebo Samuel, even during Deebo's huge year with the receiving and the rushing, because he can create separation. He's a very good route runner. He is explosive. He's not a burner, but he can create separation. Has very good hands. We should not judge Brandon Ayuk, his worth, based on what we're going to see the first month he's back or the first season he's back. It's going to be 2026 where he's going to round back into form. But I'm putting this out there because it's something that is possible to happen. How likely do I think it is? I don't think it's tremendously likely. But I will say, I think the odds of Jennings signing before camp starts and Ayuk being traded before November 4th and then extending Juwan Jennings, I think the odds of those are comparable, because I think if the Niners really wanted to sign Jennings, they would have done it already, right? Obviously, Purdy is your priority. He's the face of your franchise and your quarterback. You got to make that. You have to do that. And then obviously Kittle and obviously Warner. Maybe everyone's taking a little bit of a break, and there's still time. There's still 30 plus days or close to 30 days until training camp starts, so they can get something done. For some reason, I feel like it would have been an easier contract to get done than the other three if the Niners want to do that. But to quote John Lynch, and I think John Lynch was quoting me because I've said this numerous times in the past, in the distant past, it takes two to tango, guys. Just because anyone out there says, well, you got to re-sign player X, and why isn't he re-signing? Because maybe what the team is offering is not what the player is looking for. What the player wants is not what the team is willing to spend. It takes both sides to see eye to eye to get any sort of deal done. And maybe there's been, who knows, maybe there's been discussion between Lynch and Parag and Jennings representation. But I feel like with Pearsall coming in, with Demarcus Robinson signing for 2 years, with Watkins, Jordan Watkins being drafted, granted a 5th rounder, I think the numbers stack against Jennings getting a long-term deal that's commensurate with his value in the market. And if some very fair comparables are Rashad Bateman and Christian Kirk, then I think as long as Jennings stays healthy and has a 750 plus yard season, he's going to price himself out of what the 49ers are going to be able to offer, unfortunately. So let's dive into now some rankings. Let's start with Pro Football Focus. Gave rankings on the top 10 receiving cores in the NFL. Let me go through the top 10. So Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, Cincinnati, Detroit, the Niners coming in 5th, Minnesota, Miami, the Rams, the Bears, and the Texans. Now, first blush, being a glasses half empty type of fan and person, I think 5 is high for San Francisco. Now, here was the disclaimer that the person at PFF stated when he put this together. While it's hard to really get a feel for where they're going to be from an injury standpoint, with Ayuk coming back and Robinson being suspended and McCaffrey coming back and Kittle being another year older, the talent, if everybody is healthy, is a top 5 receiving core. Now, receiving core is different than wide receiver group, right? If it was a wide receiver group, the Niners would be out of the top 10. But when you take Kittle into consideration, when you take McCaffrey into consideration, and then Jennings, what he did last year, and Ayuk, if healthy, and Pearsall building off the last couple games of last season, I can see the Niners being in the top 10. I still think, 5 is high when you're comparing, who Philly having Green and Smith and Selleck, and Goddard, Selleck, and obviously Saquon as a receiver, what Tampa Bay brings, Cincinnati at receiver, Detroit with Laporta and the receivers that they have, even Minnesota, Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson. Miami's got good receivers. The Rams, you lose Kupp, you bring in Devontae Adams. You have Puka Nacua, not much at tight end or running back in terms of receiving. Chicago's giving Caleb Williams a lot of weapons, and Houston with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. They brought in Christian Kirk. I think they traded a 7th-round pick to the Jaguars for Christian Kirk. And, Joe Mixon can catch some balls out of the backfield. So I think the top 10 is fairly representative in terms of the teams that are here. I do think San Francisco is a little high, even if everyone's healthy. I can see them more in the 8, 9, 10 range than where they are currently. The running back group, I also have an issue with, but this time I think they're too low. San Francisco is ranked 12th behind these teams: Baltimore, Detroit, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Seattle, Tampa Bay, Green Bay, Buffalo, Arizona, Carolina, Minnesota, and then you have San Francisco at 12. Now, you look at some teams like, all right, so Baltimore's number 1, and I would even drop them behind Detroit, to be honest. Derrick Henry is great. Another year older, you don't know how at some point that body's going to break down, right? Even though he's a truck, at some point that body's going to break down. He gives you nothing in the receiving game. And who's behind him? Justice Hill? Is that getting anybody excited? Detroit, at least between Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, you have a solid 1-2 punch. In Atlanta, Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, a solid 1-2 punch. Philadelphia, it's Saquon Barkley, and they listed the number 2 as Jordan Shipley, the running back second-year running back out of Clemson. Obviously, Saquon Barkley elevates the running back group there, but as a grouping, I'm not seeing it. Same with Seattle. Kenneth Walker always misses time. Zach Charbonnet is nothing spectacular as your first 2. Tampa Bay between Irving and White. All right, I them ranked 6th. I can get behind that. Even Buffalo with James Cook and Ray Davis at 7th. I can get behind that too. Arizona, Connor, very good running back. Who else you have there? Carolina, Chuba Hubbard had a very good season. Got a nice extension. They brought in Rico Dowdle as their number 2, who went over 1,000 yards behind that offensive line. And with Cooper Rush playing uninspired football at quarterback and Trey Lance, I guess, for the last week of the season. Minnesota, an aging Aaron Jones, who's still relatively effective, and Jordan Mason as your number 2. All right, I could see them in the top 10, but I could see San Francisco with, again, if the assumption with the receiving core is that everybody's healthy, you have to make the assumption with the running backs that everybody is healthy as well. McCaffrey and Guerendo, I think, are a top 5 to 7 1-2 punch. And Isaac Guerendo, I think, at least opened my eyes as the season went on, not because of the running. Now, his vision isn't fantastic. He's got great straight line breakaway speed. He is a one-cut runner, but I think there's more that he could do to complement McCaffrey and really get the most yards out of each carry. He did rush for 420 and 4 touchdowns, 5.0 yard per carry, but where he opened my eyes was receiving. 15 for 152 in only 3 starts. And obviously he was playing some backup duty because remember, McCaffrey went down. And Kyle Shanahan was very faithful to his, we are not a running back by committee team. They were. Remember, you go back to 2018, 2019, 2020, there was Tevin Coleman and Matt Breida and Jeff Wilson. And there were times where all 3 of those running backs were getting carries in a game. But since McCaffrey's come on board, it's been the Christian McCaffrey show, with good reason to a certain extent, because he is so good at everything that he does. But Guerendo, even if it's only 15 receptions, they had him running routes McCaffrey was running. They had him running wheel routes, and Brock Purdy was comfortable enough to throw the ball to him. Now, if Guerendo had started the entire season, say Jordan Mason wasn't on the team, and he stayed healthy, he would have been 1,000-yard back, and he might have had somewhere between 35 and 50 receptions, which would have been ridiculously good in a Shanahan offense because they haven't had that outside of McCaffrey in Shanahan's tenure as head coach since 2017. So I think McCaffrey's injury is pushing McCaffrey and Guerendo down on the list. And then you still have on the team Jordan James, again, rookie out of Oregon. Not sure what he's going to be. Patrick Taylor, re-signed him. Not sure if he's even going to make the team. Corey Kiner, undrafted rookie running back out of Cincinnati. should he make the team? That's if Kiner makes the team and those are your 4 running backs, you got a pretty young running back room, right? McCaffrey's obviously the veteran. He's going to be 29 years old, but Guarendo's his second year. Then you would potentially have 2 rookies. You're guaranteed to have 1 rookie on the team. I think they're sleeping on the Niners running back group, even as a whole. And I think they're more of a top 5, top 7 running back group than, some of the teams, Baltimore, Seattle, Green Bay. I think I skipped over them. Just Josh Jacobs. Who else? So how's that a good running back group that they're ranking 7th? And Arizona and Carolina. So Pro Football Focus gave the Niners some love at receiving, but I think threw them some shade then with running backs, maybe to balance out those 2 position groups. And last but not least, Bleacher Report released its top cornerback tandems. San Francisco coming in 9th with Demo and Renardo Green. Let me go through the full top 10. Houston with Stingley and Laster. Baltimore with Marlon Humphrey and Nate Wiggins. Pittsburgh with Darius Slade joining them and Joey Porter Jr. New England with Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis III. Seattle with Reek Woolen and Devin Witherspoon. Chicago with Jalen Johnson and Stevenson. Dallas with Diggs and Deron Bland. The Chargers with Jackson and Still. The Niners, like I mentioned, Demo and Green. And Philadelphia with their 2 second-year cornerbacks in Kerryon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. This feels right to me. This one feels right. Now, there's a lot of Niner fans. I love Demo. Again, self-made player, 5th-round pick out of Oregon. Struggled his first 2 years. Feisty, though. Worked on his craft. Became one of, if not, I saw based on some rankings, they ranked him as the top slot cornerback the last 2 seasons. Let's just say he's top 5. That's fantastic. But Niner fans are getting a little crazy saying, oh, Demo's he's like a top 7 corner. I'm not sure about that. If Demo were to crack the top 10 as just a cornerback, I think that would be very generous. That's still good. You still want a top 10 cornerback on your team, because there's 64 starting cornerbacks in the NFL. So he would be in the top 6th of the league. I mean, that's pretty darn good. Pairing him with Renardo Green at 9th and in the top 10, I think feels right, especially with Demo's flexibility. Now, again, this is a cornerback pairing, so they're just looking at Demo and Green, not Demo moving outside and Upton Stout playing the slot, Upton Stout, or if it's Trey Brown, formerly of the Seahawks, going outside on nickel situations and Demo bumping inside to the slot. They're just looking at their top 2 corners, but I think this feels right. I think Demo is, only going to get better. And the flexibility that he offers is fantastic. And Renardo Green had, I think, a 74.5 coverage grade by Pro Football Focus last year, which matches the highest that Demo has ever had in his career. Had a very good showing his rookie year. And I think that the secondary, every level of the defense, the linebackers, the defensive line, the pass rush, the blitz packages, the disguising, everything's going to get better with Robert Saleh in now instead of Nick Sorensen. So I feel I wanted to end on, it's not necessarily a high note when you're talking about a top 10 and the Niners cornerback tandem ranking 9th, but I think it's starting. I think I'm going to end on a very fair, objective note. And this is what I'm kind of preaching the podcast being about: fair and balanced and objective and no hot takes. I think that feels right for what we saw out of Demo and Green last year during a season where the defense as a whole was just not very good. And it's the unit. I think it's probably one of the units in all of the NFL that might have among the biggest increases in all of the NFL under Robert Saleh, and a whole bunch of rookies and a whole bunch of youth and speed and athleticism that they're bringing in to a defense that still has Nick Bosa and Fred Warner and Demo and Mustafa when he's going to, come back and be healthy. There's still some all-pro, Pro Bowl level players on this defense that are being supplemented by free agents and rookies. And oh yeah, Robert Saleh per George Kittle, who said, can't wait to have you to see what Robert Saleh is going to do. He is going to bring the violence. I'm all for that. as long as it's controlled violence. Because if it's uncontrolled violence, it means you have players out of position, missing tackles, playing too fast, getting over their skis. A lot of time to wrinkle that stuff out, but the familiar face in Robert Saleh being back is going to elevate a team and a unit that still has a lot of really good veterans and a lot of promising young players as well. So that's going to conclude the podcast for today. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to make us part of your listening and viewing routine. We are still in the dog days of summer, less than 30 days to go until training camp. But I'm trying to keep these podcasts a little bit shorter. I know we're going on 35 plus minutes, but just to have more content to pump out there. And there will definitely be another podcast or two next week. So whatever you're doing between now and then, everyone stay happy, healthy, and stay safe. We will talk soon. Take care.